Hello, everybody. Tracy, Mrs. JDog Flanagan with you here today. I'm the co-founder and senior vice president at JDog Brands. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Tactical Treasures podcast, sponsored by the JDog Foundation. Our podcast gives veterans, male spouses, active military members, military family members, and patriotic military supporters a voice in the veteran space to speak about their service, how they're affecting their communities post-service, and they share with me a tactical treasure that has shaped their journey in their military career, business, or life. Today, I am so pleased to have with me Jacob Corwin. Jake Corwin was raised in Central Virginia to a family where more than 50% of his male relatives have served or would eventually serve in the military. His lifelong love of animals led him to a career in commercial beef ranching and horse training. During the pandemic of 2019 to 2020, he began to feel God calling him to pursue ministry in some form, and his surrender to that call led him to the National Center for Healthy Veterans at Valor Farm, where he became the livestock foreman and is now the general manager. In his role at Valor, he finds true fulfillment and purpose by helping our nation's veterans understand and unpack their trauma by interacting with animals and developing relationships with them as they work side by side to maintain and operate the farm. Hello, Jake. Thanks for joining me today, and thank you for your family's service. Wow, 50% of your male relatives serving. That's amazing.
Hey
So,
Tracy, good to see you.
hey, good to see you. So, I'm excited for our discussion today. You say 50% of your male relatives served. Are parents, grandparents, uncles, cousins?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, all of that. For the most part, both my grandfathers were Navy,
oh,
and
wow.
I spent a considerable amount of time with one of them. He really helped raise me in a lot of ways. We would ride with him. He was a contractor, so I grew up homeschooled, so I had a lot of time throughout the day and would ride with him, especially in the summer times as well, and spend nights at his house. And so is very much a part of my life, just that Navy mentality of, drink coffee all day long and all that kind of
Right.
thing. And I grew up asking questions about his tattoos and different things. But and then
Right.
his brother was in the Air Force, and I think out of his brother's oldest son had like 7 kids, and 5 of them were boys, and I think 4 of those boys served in the military,
Wow.
Army, Air Force, and Coast Guard, I believe.
Wow.
And then a
That's
lot of
amazing.
a lot of my friends growing up were Air Force. One of my uncles was career Air Force and retired, and then continued to work for the secretary for several years after that. So it's just a lot of military all around me as I grew
Right.
up.
I would say sounds like you were an incubator
Somewhat.
of military growing up and well into, past childhood. So that's amazing. But you certainly looked the part, but you did actually become kind of a real life cowboy. um, ranching and beef ranching and, horse training. So I would love to hear what inspired you to kind of go in that direction.
Sure, sure. So growing up, uh, like a lot of kids in America, I was always playing cowboy, wanted to be a cowboy, loved horses, roping, everything about it. And then as I got older, I didn't grow up around agriculture in particular, mostly in the suburbs. So I didn't have a lot of exposure. As I already said, I grew up homeschooled. So things like FFA, 4-H weren't a part of my life. Homeschooling was great. I don't have anything really bad to say about it. It's just that some of those exposure factors aren't always there depending on what community you're in. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I loved animals. Always loved animals. I think I read the James Herriot series on, all creatures great and small, the veterinarian short stories. I think I probably read through those books 8 or 10 times a piece. And
Wow.
the older I got, the more I had trouble with structure, the more I had trouble with organized education, especially when I got into college and things. The structure surrounding those organizations didn't fit me very well, or I didn't fit it. And some of that was, part of me not being mature enough to be disciplined, to be frank. Um,
Sure.
but so being a veterinarian requires quite a bit of education. And
Yeah.
I gave up on that fairly quickly once I got into that level. And so uh, I kind of was directionless for several years. I graduated high school early. I'd skipped a couple grades in middle school, and I graduated early. And I did a couple years in college, business management and journalism, different things that I was trying to just kind of kicking around to figure out where I fit.
Right.
And I at least was smart enough to realize that I was wasting my time and my money and my parents' money by doing that in an educational sense because I really didn't like any of the stuff I was doing. So I just went
Right.
back to work. I'd worked construction growing up in high school. And so I went back into construction and worked some other jobs too. I got pretty miserable with that. I learned a lot. I made a lot of good friends. I learned a lot of good and bad things. That was a period of wandering for me in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways of seeing what the world had to offer. I was raised in a really religious home, and it always kind of followed and towed the line for the most part. But I also had a lot of rebellion and authority issues, which is why I never went in the military. I knew that wouldn't work.
Right.
I would,
Right.
I would not have done well in that. So I kicked around for a while, and finally, through a series of interesting events, your mother tends to give good advice and know when things are right for her kid. And she met this lady that had come to work in our church, who was the daughter of an orthopedic surgeon in Georgia, and that man had gotten into horsemanship and roping and had bought a ranch and had some cattle there and was kind of doing everything in a more traditional horseback way. And I had no idea that that even existed anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Come to find out, it exists in a big way still in America. Um,
Right.
so I I called that guy up and I said, hey, I want to learn what you're doing. It's something I've always wanted to try, and if you can pay me enough to make my truck payment, I'll come do whatever you need to just for the chance to learn. And he said, well, I don't really have anything right now. He didn't know me from Adam. I just called and dropped his daughter's name and said, hey, I want to come work for you. uh, but he said, I've got some, he said, why don't you come down for the weekend and we can visit? And, I don't think I have any work right now, but come on down and visit. I said, okay. It was a 10-hour drive, but it didn't matter at that point. I was so miserable I was building barns and I was watching all these horses and watching people take care of the horses. And every day I was like, man, I'd be much happier down there than up here putting steel on this roof. So he called me back the next morning. And at that point, I had started to turn back towards God. I had gone through a period of real rebellion, and I'd made the decision that I was going to follow God. And I told him, if you open a door, I'm going to walk through it. And this felt like an open door, but then it felt like it got slammed in my face. And I had a choice there of like, well, forget it. I'm going to go back to what I was doing, or I'm going to still trust. And I said, okay, God, if you open the door, I'm going to walk through it. He said, come down. I'm going to come down. Well, the next morning he called me back. He said, hey, he must have talked to his daughter, I guess, and maybe vetted me a little bit. That's
Right.
probably be smart on his part, looking back. And he called me the next morning and he said, why don't you come on down this weekend like we talked, but plan on staying for about 3 months? I've got some projects I could use some help. I said, sweet. So I called my boss, quit my job, told him I was taking my last week of vacation. And by the way, here's my 1 week notice. And I peeled out for Georgia that weekend, which probably wasn't the most mature thing to do, but it was what we did. And I ended up staying there for 18 months. That was an incredible opportunity because he was so focused on, he created that ranch. His name is Bill Barnes. He's an awesome, awesome guy. Just a very unique individual with a passion for learning and for excellence. He's a really well respected and accomplished surgeon there in around Macon, Georgia. And he really gave me an opportunity, being a kid that knew absolutely nothing and that he knew absolutely nothing about. He gave me an opportunity to follow a dream that most people don't have an opportunity to even realize.
Right.
So I got to go down there and, we were roping 3 or 4 days a week, practicing and then doctoring cattle and working cattle. And it was a lot of farm work, a lot of, there's a lot that goes into it, bush hogging and plowing, different things like that. But I ended up staying there 18 months and then met some people there that set me up for different jobs down the road. Uh, but probably the biggest thing that happened while I was in Georgia for that year and a half was that I was around people who knew God in a way that I had never experienced him. I grew up very religious, but the concept of having a working relationship with a God who interacted with you through his spirit was still somewhat foreign to me. And I
Mm,
was introduced to that, and I was put in a place very much where I was isolated from all of the influences that had always distracted me. Because I knew
sure.
nobody when I went down there, and God used that time to really teach me more about him and who he was. And my faith grew exponentially while I was there. And that's that's been a foundational time. That year and a half was just such a training ground and a proving ground for what the next now 16 years would be.
Right. You started out as a ranch manager, now general manager at Valor Farm,
Mm-hmm.
which is, the National Center for Healthy Veterans, and you do great work there. How did you get there?
Sure. When I came back from Georgia, I I worked several different jobs that all came with different levels of experience and different little pieces of knowledge and information, and it all ended up building together. And then I spent about 8 years on a commercial cattle outfit up here, and ended up the last 3 years of that eight, I was the herd manager for it was a commercial herd. We calved in the spring and in the fall. We had about 800, 850 brood cows, depending on what year it was, and it was a great job. It was a ton of fun. It was so much fun, and it was so much the dream that I had always had that it actually became something of an idol in my life. It became my identity was wrapped up in being a cowboy and
Mm,
being a rancher, and in that ranch, in doing those things, and that eventually began to wear on my mental health. It began to wear on my marriage. Um, while I was in Georgia, I reconnected with my high school sweetheart, love of my life, and God used that time to restore a lot of things that I had broken, and our relationship was one of them. And we ended up getting married soon after I moved back to Virginia. We've got a 7-year-old boy that we love to death. That's a whole other story in and of itself. But we, that the ranching lifestyle is very much a lifestyle. There's a common saying in that community that it's not a job, it's a lifestyle, right? Very much
right.
the same way that the military is, it's a lifestyle, not a job. You're PCSing every 2 years. You're deploying on missions, and when you're on mission, you're mission focused, and your spouse is at home, keeping the home fires burning. It's very much the same way in the ranching community, because there are times of the year where if you don't get this right and get this done, like breeding cattle so that they have calves, calving cattle so that the calves stay alive, making hay so that the cows have something to eat, all these things are so integral to that big paycheck at the end of the year that if you don't get them right, nothing else matters. So you're mission focused during those times. So it's very much like a deployment. Like you're home, but you're not home. And you might,
Right.
you'll work. Some guys never take a day off. There were times for me, I would go 60, 90 days and never take a day off because you're just so focused on what you're doing.
Right.
And that wears on a marriage after a while, especially if, like for me, my wife doesn't come from ag. She's not particularly a horsewoman, but we're united on a spiritual level. We're each other's
Hmm.
best friend. We're united on a mental level. Like we feed each other's intellect. Um, so after 8 years on that job, probably around year 6 or 7, the pandemic hit. I got to spend a lot more time with my wife. She's a high school teacher, so she was at home all the time because they weren't in school, and it was just different, and it was good. And during that time, I had gone through some seasons of testing where God, I had become angry with God in a lot of ways. A lot of that connected to the birth of my son. He was born 7 weeks premature and had some heart conditions. We weren't sure if he was going to live, and it was a really trying time. And that combined with some other experiences in my life, failures of people that I depended on, um, created doubt in me, and it created anger within me towards God, and some bitterness.
Mm,
And I questioned my faith during that period. but through a series of different things, different people, different experiences, God called me back to him. And I knew that he was calling me into some sort of ministry. He was calling me to do something more than take care of another man's cows. There was
Right.
something more that he had in store for me, and I could feel my heart stirring. But I thought it was going to create a situation where I would have to give up this lifestyle, give up this identity that I had built and come to depend on. And that was so
Right.
hard for me to let go of that it took 2 years of God pushing me and pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. And finally I said, okay, I can't run anymore. I can't do it. I can't do it. Like, I'm going to lose everything if I keep holding on to this. That was the place that I was at with my wife
Right.
and with my kid. I'm going to lose everything if I don't fix this. And so I said, okay, whatever you need me to do, just show me what it is, open the door, and I'll walk through it, right? Same as I said 12, 14 years before that, open the
Right.
door and I'll walk through it. And within a week, I can't remember if it was within a week or if it was the same day, but Valor Farm, National Center for Healthy Veterans, popped on my radar through a conversation I had with a client. And within 30 days, we had a business plan put together and figured out how we were going to work. It was just a complete natural fit. They needed everything that I brought to the table, and I needed what they were doing. One of their big missions here is suicide prevention. And because obviously within the veteran community, most folks listening to your podcast probably know this, but 22 veterans a day in America take their own lives.
Yeah.
And that's more than likely a low estimate based on the statistics that we know. Early on in my childhood, a Vietnam veteran who was part of my family took his own life. I think I was probably
Oh,
6 or 7, about my son's age at the time. I wasn't around. I didn't see it. I wasn't particularly close to him, although I did know him. But I knew what happened. Like, my parents didn't shield me from it, right? Like,
right.
he used a shotgun, and it was messy, and it was awful, and everybody was rocked, right?
Sure.
So early
Mm.
on, I knew what that
Tragic.
was. And then there were experiences in my life as a teenager where I put myself in situations where I was so hopeless that I considered suicide, that I began to deal with that. So it was something that was part of me. And from there on, for a variety of reasons, suicide was something that I struggled with every time I got to a depressed and hopeless place. So I
Mm.
understood that call. And
Right.
I didn't actually realize that when I started to come and work here and help here. But
Mm-hmm.
the more that I got into it, those things started to click into place. And I realized why I was so drawn to this ministry, why I understood what was going on. And in the
Right.
ranching community, there's a suicide epidemic in farming and ranching that's every bit as prevalent as in the military, for the same
Really?
reasons. Yeah, for the same reasons.
Wow.
Overwork, isolation, substance abuse, stress, all of these things. There's actually a huge movement that's surrounded by another podcast called Wild Courage with Jeremy Morris. That is they're working to combat that in the ranching and farming communities because the mental
Wow.
health is a huge issue.
Wow. That's I hadn't heard of that before until
Mm-hmm.
now. Having you shared all that you have, I can see how that could be an issue. Yeah.
Sure.
Wow. Now, so you started as a like foreman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ranch foreman. Now you're the general manager. So, and I've had a few podcasts, and we all know that equine therapy is huge in the veteran community, and there's such a synergy that happens between veterans and horses that you know, having not experienced something like that is hard to understand, but it's so prevalent, But you kind of head up that program, but you also teach horsemanship, and so I would love to hear, what you do there and how all that works.
So we do two different things with horses with our veterans here. Three really. They work in the barn and they work with the horses and help care for them, that's huge for them. Winston Churchill said
Right.
the outside of a horse is good for the inside of a man. So
Mm.
a lot of times we'll have veterans who are really struggling with things as they unpack their trauma and they unpack their experience, and they'll actually start coming down here voluntarily and spending time with horses and just taking a brush out in the pasture and brushing down horses just to get some peace because that's where they find that understanding. So there's some kind of what we call backdoor benefits to just having the
Right.
horses around. So but it's significant. It really is. The working with the
Hmm.
horses, we refer to that as work therapy, occupational therapy. It's a big part of what we do for a reason. The equine therapy piece is something that I spearheaded early on, and I've been able to hand that over to somebody that's a little bit more talented than I am as far as organization and record keeping. That's not my strong suit. Everything that I do
Yeah.
is relational, and
Uh-huh.
it's about developing relationships. And if it involves records and things like that, I can do it, but I'm not the best at it. But our barn manager, Caitlin, excuse me, she's our equine services director now. Caitlin Ham, she's fantastic at what she does, and but I still assist as a facilitator with the equine therapy program. We use a platform called Arenas for Change, and that's abbreviated to ARCH. And the concept there is that everybody has a story. All right. We all have a story in our lives, and our
Hmm.
lives are made up of small stories within a larger story. And with Arenas for Change or ARCH, we look at the arc of that story and we see the beginning, we can see the climax, and we can see the end. And as you pass over that arch or under that arch, through that arch, you're getting through all of the details. And when you look at it, stand back and look at it, you can see from a 30,000-foot view why what happened happened. Our therapy piece is very much talk therapy, but we do it with the horses. So we'll go out in a pasture with the horses and we'll say, okay, there's 4 horses in this pasture. Take a look at them, take a look at their surroundings, take a look at what they're doing, and tell us what you notice. Through doing that, they start to notice different things, and we start to ask questions about those things. And if they need help getting going, we might ask them to assign characters to the horses, or we might ask them to tell us what's happening in the group that they see. And they start to create this story. And sometimes it looks like an actual story with a plot and characters that are named. And sometimes it's just, well, this horse reminds me of so and so. Some people just need a space to talk, and they just need an opportunity for somebody to say, tell us about you. And being around the horses, because of the physiological benefits of being next to a horse, the electromagnetic field surrounding their heart is so strong that within 4 feet of them, it actually calms your heart rate, it calms your respiration, lowers your
That's
blood.
amazing.
It is, it's
That,
fantastic.
wow.
And they're so peaceful. Like, horses are honest, they can't lie. They are what they are, and they're a product of their behavior is a product of their interaction. So when we work with these horses, we can say, okay, well, he's behaving this way. Why do you think he's doing that? And as they begin to understand how horses work, they start to understand why the horses act that way, and they start to relate the horses to themselves. But being able to project their story onto the horses and the setting, and look at it from a detached view, right? They get that 30,000-foot view, and they can say, well, this is my squad, and this is me, and this is my sergeant, and this is what happened. And they can look at those horses from an external perspective, and they can unpack their story without having to be in it, right? They can say,
Right.
this happened here and here and here and here, but it's them telling the story, not being in the story. And it
Right.
really helps them to be able to take a detached look at it, back off to a 30,000-foot view, or sometimes we zoom into a minute detail and say, did you notice this? What do you think about this? And they can figure out how that detail affected everything else. So they learn to understand why what happened happened. It's hugely impactful. As a staff, when we were going through the training and the certification process for this, we practiced on each other, and there has not been a single first session in any of those practices where it was our first time being the client that we weren't in tears. It's incredibly powerful, what we
Wow.
do with that. The
That's amazing.
horsemanship piece, that's where I probably get the most excited, because I love horsemanship. I've been really, really blessed to work under some incredible horsemen that just uh, cared about the horse and cared about communicating with the horse from the horse's perspective and understanding why the horse reacts the way it does, and trying to present what you're asking the horse to do in a way that the horse will understand and not be fearful of. Because that's really
Hmm.
the thing that one of the reasons that veterans and horses work so well together, and why the horses are so beneficial, is because horses are by nature a flight animal.
Mm,
Their survival is based on their ability to run, if necessary, to defend by kicking, biting, striking, bucking, whatever it is. Their survival is based on their awareness, based on their alertness. They are by nature hypervigilant, which is one of the biggest symptoms of PTSD.
right.
So when we start to unpack that and we start to explain to these guys why the horses behave this way, I start a lot of young horses, and we do a horsemanship class with the veterans once a week. And if I have young horses coming in, foals that were halter training, different things like that, I'll I'll explain that to the guys while I'm working with them. This horse is behaving this way because he feels like he has to defend himself. Or sometimes we'll get horses that have been abused. Sometimes we'll get horses that have been rescued
Mm,
from bad situations. And then I can explain to the guys, this is why this horse is reacting. He's been treated this way. It's my job to prove to him that he doesn't have to react that way, that he can trust me. And so they
right.
start to identify in the horse what they see in themselves, right?
Mm,
Um,
right. Yeah.
Buck Brannaman, or yeah, Buck Brannaman said that your horses are a mirror to your souls. That's really what we see when these guys start to work with these horses. And then a lot of it's there's side backdoor benefits to that too. We get these guys comfortable working with the horses on the ground. We teach them how to saddle a horse, how to bridle a horse. Then we get them up and we get them riding, and then we get them to where they can accomplish goals, where they can uh, warp through an obstacle course on their horse, and they can gather the cattle with us and bring them in and do a little sorting practice in the arena. And yesterday we were playing a game called Polo Cross, which is polo and lacrosse mixed together, and it's just fun ways for them to do things. But for a lot of them, they've never been around horses, or their interaction with horses has been very negative, very fearful.
Right.
So they have to overcome fear, and then riding a horse isn't easy. And
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
they've got to
Yeah.
figure out how to overcome frustration and how to work through the problem, which is very difficult for them a lot of times
Right.
because they've spent so much time just walking away from anything that was hard, and
Right.
just doing what was the
Hello,
easiest.
viewers and listeners. Are you a military veteran or a military family member and looking to own your own business? If so, go to jdog.com and check out our two veteran focused franchises, JDog Junk Removal and Hauling and JDog Carpet Cleaning and Floor Care. Our franchisees nationwide are always looking to hire fellow veterans and patriots. JDog is the world's largest military franchise system with hundreds of locations nationwide. We are nearly 90% veteran owned with the goal of reducing the veteran unemployment rate to under 1%. Check us out. Go to jdog.com to learn more. Now, back to the podcast.
Yeah, I think I've ridden a horse maybe once or twice, and I have to tell you, I think they're amazingly beautiful animals,
Mm,
and obviously very intuitive and do a lot for our veterans. But I have to tell you, I like for me to stand next to a horse, like I'm fearful. They
hmm
are just so massive,
right.
and so I have a fear. I would
Well, and
I would need to get over that.
I think
And I'm
that's a
sure like
parallel. I think that's a
right,
parallel because for these guys, some of them may feel like the world is scared of them, right? But they're
right,
scared of the world. Same for the
right.
horse.
Sure.
Same for the
Yeah.
horse.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah, interesting analogy there. Yeah, definitely. This has been amazing. And I've had General Bob Dees on my podcast, and he's talked a lot about, the program that you have going there. And I just think it's absolutely amazing. But now we come to the time in the podcast where I have to ask you, what is your tactical treasure, Jake? What are you going to share with us today?
there is a concept that I have come to live by. It's a word that I believe God gave to me during my time in Georgia. And it's recurred in my life every time that there was a big decision to make, every time that there was a change or a transition coming. I was worried and I
Mm.
was stressed and I was thinking about giving up. At the time, it was the verse of once you've put your hand to the plow, don't turn back. It's become now for me the concept of burning the ships, right? Burn the
Ah,
ships. Don't give
right.
yourself a way out. Once you start, I feel that God called me to this place, and I tell people all the time, I'm not going anywhere. As people are worried, like, what happens if you leave? I'm not going anywhere. When things get hard, they say, you're not going to leave, are you? No, I'm not going to leave. I haven't been called to somewhere else. I've been called to here. And
Yeah.
you've got to, if you're going to be successful, you have to burn the ships when you put your hand to something difficult, because you know that difficulty is going to come. Life is difficult. Life is hard. If there's something
Yeah.
worthwhile, if there's something you believe you should do, you have to keep your hand on the plow. Don't turn back. Burn the ships. Don't give yourself a way out
Mm.
mentally. Mentally, don't give yourself a way out. Say that you're there and stay there until it's done. And for these veterans, I really believe that that is a huge part of what keeps them from being successful. Because, like I just said a minute ago, when things get hard, they tend to give up. One of the things that I get on these guys for all the time is when things get hard or when things get difficult and they get frustrated, there's this constant theme, and they'll say, F it, right? They say,
Yeah.
they'll just walk away. You can't do that. That's not life. That will get you alone and hopeless with a trail of unfinished projects behind you.
Right. Right.
And it's a tendency that we all have, right? None of us
Mm-hmm.
want to do the hard things. None of us want to
Sure.
go through the frustration. We don't want to be uncomfortable. There's no comfort in the growth zone, and there's no growth in the comfort zone. Like,
Right.
that's
Sure.
so for me, the concept of burn the ships is just one that I live by, and one that I try to put into these guys. Like, listen, if it's hard, it's probably working. Trust the process, stay with it.
Mm.
It will get better, but stop saying F it and walking away from it. You can't do it, because
Right.
don't give yourself that option, right? Whenever you
Right.
feel yourself wanting to say that, stop and start thinking. Use your brain, figure out what's bothering you, figure out how to fix it, look at it logically. And that's really what keeps most of them from being successful, and why we have veterans in this program, is
Right.
because they've been beaten down so many times that they've stopped trying. And horses are
Yeah.
the same way, right? Horses are
Right.
exactly the same way. If you jerk on a horse enough, he's going to get so dull that he just doesn't do anything.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's the same with
And
people.
yeah, I love that. And there's a song called "Burn the Ships"
Hmm. Yeah, you sent it to me.
by King and Country,
Yeah,
for King and Country.
yeah,
That's the group that sings that song. And but you're right, because I think mentally, if you give yourself that out,
hmm,
it's almost like you can easily go there,
right.
and easily say, oh, well, this is too hard. And I think, when things are hard, I think you grow the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's you don't grow much during easy times,
No,
right? But during tough times, that's where the growth happens, truly,
absolutely.
in your life, and you as a person.
Yeah.
I've found that to be true. But I love your tactical treasure. I think it's awesome. I would love to know, Valor Farm, and you've been there for how long now?
3.5 years.
Right, yeah. Um, so I would love to know, what have you seen, as far as results for veterans who have come through Valor Farm and have maybe, come out on the other side?
Oh,
And is there any advice that you would have for veterans that might be looking at this opportunity?
sure. The results here have been just incredible. I've seen guys come to us, but they were guys. The two in particular I'm thinking of were guys that I had relationships with um, prior to them being in the program. But guys come in here suicidal. They come in here
Mm.
off of suicide attempts. They come in here off of 2 week psych evals, and they're broken and they're hopeless, and they can't function. They don't believe there's any good in the world. They want to fight everybody.
Mm,
Or they
right.
just want to retreat from everybody. They don't believe they have any value or purpose, right?
Yeah.
And I see them work through this program, and the way it's set up, the first trimester they focus on resilience, and the second trimester they focus on reboot trauma recovery, which is unpacking their trauma and understanding it. And in those 6 months, in the first 3 months, you start to see them brighten and you start to see them come out of their shell. And where they looked at the ground before and they didn't talk unless they had to, now
Mm.
they look you in the eye and they joke and they smile. And the second trimester, they dig deep and they might start looking at the ground some more because they're in it, right? They're
Yeah.
dealing with things. And they start to unpack them. And around the time they get through that reboot recovery in that second trimester, about that 6 month of the 9 month program, that 6 month, end of that 6 month, they start to turn a corner. And you see guys that were so focused on themselves and so focused on their problems and so focused on what wasn't right for them start to worry about, hey, this guy over here is not doing good. How can we help him? I love it when these guys come to me about that. They say, hey,
Wow.
so and so, have you checked on him? He's not doing great. I say, no, let's go check on him, right? Because they're more
Yeah.
worried about helping somebody else, or they say, hey, I noticed this didn't get done. Do you need me to help you with that? Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
That's awesome. Thank you. They start to care more about other people and about helping other people. And then you get a new cohort rolling in behind them. So we roll guys through in groups of 5-ish, and they go through the whole program together. So they have a community around them. They have brothers they work with and do life with, and do classes with. So they aren't, there's no cliques really. It's just these groups that work together, and then they interact throughout different times with other groups. But when we get new cohorts coming in, those guys at that 6 month mark are the guys that take them under their wing and they say, hey, let me show
Oh,
you how this
wow.
is, and let me show you what this is like, and this is how this is, and this guy's cool, and whatever. So it's this cool dynamic of they start to be leaders. And that's really what this place is designed for. We're absolutely designed for suicide prevention. We're absolutely designed to help with trauma recovery. But at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is to take these veterans who were leaders in their squads, they were leaders in their platoons, they were leaders in their units, and take them and help them heal, and then give them the opportunity to be leaders in their communities, in their families,
Wow.
in their
Yeah.
jobs, in their churches, in their towns, whatever. We want them to be the next generation of leaders in America because we know they have that potential. They've had the training. They were trained to
Mm-hmm.
be leaders. They were trained to care about their brothers. But life has beaten them down so much that they feel they don't have that ability. And so if we can restore in them that desire and restore in them that belief in themselves, that they are valuable, that they do have purpose, that they do have skills,
Right.
then
Yeah.
they can turn around and lead others. So when I start to see them being leaders, I know they're on their way. They're going to coast through
Yeah.
to graduation, and they're going to be
Right.
successful at the end of it. It's fantastic to watch.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And Jerry and I had the privilege of attending the awards dinner at the Union League at the end of May,
Mm-hmm.
and we met General Bob Dees and sat at his table, and what a inspiring event. It was just amazing to learn so much of what you guys are doing there, what you're trying to accomplish, understanding, being able to understand the mission. It's just amazing. I think it's just awesome work
Did you
that's
get
being
to
done.
Did you get to hear my friend Kevin speak?
I did. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I got I got the privilege of baptizing Kevin in the Big Otter River that runs through the property on New Year's Day this year,
Oh,
which
wow.
was one of the high points of my life.
Yeah. Oh, that was amazing. His story. Wow.
Yeah.
Ugh, I know some of the two stories that were told there were just so inspiring, and to see these two veterans having come out on the other side is
Mhm.
was just amazing. Just and speaks volumes to the great work that you guys are doing. So, where can people find more information on the Center for Healthy Veterans, and how can they be a part of it? I know you guys are a nonprofit, so you function on, donations and grants and that sort of thing. So can people donate at the website, and if they want to be a part of the program and go through, can they find information there as well?
Sure. Yeah. So the website is the one-stop shop for everything National Center for Healthy Veterans. The web address is healthyveterans.org,
Mm-hmm.
and you can refer a patriot there. You can self-refer there as a patriot, fill out an
Mm-hmm.
application. There's an option to donate there, and there's an option to volunteer there.
Oh,
All
wow.
of those
Great.
things are great, and they're all right there on the website. It's a great resource. You can learn more about what we do and how we do it there. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram. I believe we're on LinkedIn as well. But the website, if you want to
Yes,
get
you are.
involved, if you want to learn more and you want to see how you can help, or if you think we might be a place that you need, or if somebody needs us,
Mm-hmm.
that's your stop. Healthyveterans.org.
Okay, that's great. Great information. We'll make sure we get the word out. Jake, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your story, and your journey was awesome, from cowboy life to what you're doing now, and to see you, it's amazing how, God prepares us for every step that he takes us in life.
It's
And
that arc of the
obviously,
story, right?
yeah,
That
right. Everything that you've gone
yeah,
through has brought you to
such a
this
time as
position
this. Yeah,
of such a time as being general manager, and giving back by applying your know-how, your skills, and your passion at what you're doing at Valor Farm there in Virginia. So I think it's just amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that you did. It was just great to talk to you.
thank you, Tracy.
Hello, viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Tactical Treasures Podcast. We've just finished up an amazing conversation with Jacob Corwin, who is a military family member and went into the world of commercial beef ranching and horse training. He is now the general manager at Valor Farm, which is the National Center for Healthy Veterans, and their mission is to return healthy veterans to America. As a nation, we are confronted with an urgent need and a moral responsibility to restore and replenish the lives of veterans who have selflessly served and experienced trauma over the last 20 years of war. Our veterans have pledged their lives for our freedom, security, and prosperity. Healthy veterans are productive members of society, good employees, and positive role models, but not all of our veterans are healthy. To accomplish their tactical mission of returning healthy veterans to America, NCHV engages with veterans through virtual interaction, case management of walk-ons and referrals, and a one-year residential program at its Virginia Valor Farm. It integrates Christian best practices one veteran at a time to heal the mind, body, and spirit, to defeat isolation in community living, to provide dignified work on active farm, ranch, and construction projects, to deliver Christian trauma recovery and life skill programs, to enhance career preparation and skills training, and ultimately to prevent veteran suicide. While the situation may seem unrecoverable, most vets, with the help of NCHV, can return to their communities as healthy future leaders. These former warriors are untapped national treasures who should be remobilized to benefit every sector of America. To learn more, volunteer, and to donate, go to healthyveterans.org. Again, thanks for joining us. And don't forget, you can find Tactical Treasures podcasts on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms, as well as Vet TV, American Grit, and our dedicated YouTube channel. We're now airing on Reach Across America Radio on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. And if you miss that, join us for the encore on Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can also find Reach Across America Radio on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app. We're also proud to share that our JDog Foundation is a Reach Across America sponsorship group. For each $17 veterans wreath that you sponsor, $5 goes directly back to the JDog Foundation, whose mission is to prevent veteran suicide and heal veterans' mental health and PTSD. You can donate right now at reachacrossamerica.org/JDog. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again on another podcast real soon. Bye-bye now.